Hi, this is Mike DeCourcy, senior writer of the Sporting News, about to cover my 33rd Final Four. Which of the 68 teams, which four of the 68 teams do you think will join us? Let's look at my bracket, and we'll try to figure it out. And we will start in the South region, where the NCAA Selection Committee gave Alabama a pretty nice ride. It starts at the top. Obviously, they will advance from their 1-16 matchup, and I believe in the second round they will be playing Maryland. Very close call between Maryland and West Virginia. Both have their strengths and weaknesses. I think West Virginia is a little bit too turnover prone, too prone to making the big mistake, and I think that Maryland will be able to get through that. San Diego State and Charleston, one of the toughest bracket calls in the entire tournament. I really love Charleston, but San Diego State is tough physically, mentally. They survive close games. So unless Charleston is just hitting the threes everywhere, we're going to go with San Diego State. And Virginia over Furman. Furman's very dangerous. They can really play offense if they are making shots. They're one of the mid-major teams. If they're hitting shots, they're dangerous. But I have Virginia there. Creighton, NC State, another of the toughest of all the calls. Mostly because neither team has been what it should be lately. But Creighton has more. Its A game is higher than NC State. So I went with the Blue Jays, and then Baylor over UCSB. Not a tough call. Baylor, a really talented team, not having its best year either. But I think obviously they survived the 3-14 matchup. Missouri and Utah State, the betting favorite, even though they're the lower seed, is Utah State. I kind of understand that. You never really know what you're going to get from Missouri. But Missouri has played pretty consistently recently, including in the SEC tournament where they gave Alabama a pretty fair competition. The only team in that tournament that even challenged Alabama. So I'll go with the Tigers over Utah State, and then Arizona to defeat Princeton, of course. Second round, Alabama moves on again. Just too much talent on the Tide. San Diego State versus Virginia, they're kind of like the East Coast, West Coast of grinded out defensive teams. San Diego State, I went with, that's just a literal toss-up. I went with San Diego State because I believe in Bradley. I think he is a terrific guard, and decided to go with Matt Bradley as the guy that makes the difference. Creighton against Baylor, another tough call, but I like Creighton's size. Their depth of ability on the perimeter. I wish I could see the best of Creighton, especially since I picked them to win that game, but we'll see how it goes. Mizzou against Arizona. Mizzou, if Mizzou can get through the first one, I'm not sure that they can do two in a row. So let's go with the Wildcats from Tucson. And then Alabama, SD State, another one, didn't have a lot of tough call there. And Creighton versus Arizona. I'm going with Creighton. I figure if they get this far, then they found something. They've got that center, Ryan Kalkbrenner, who's so good. They've a veteran at point guard, multiple wings who can score from the perimeter and take it inside. I'll go with Creighton. I don't feel great about it, but I don't feel great about anybody in that region except for Bama. So we're going on to the Elite Eight, where Alabama will prevail again, and they will head on to Houston. Down in the East region, Purdue against the 16 seed. Purdue is not going to be Virginia 2018. Memphis against Florida Atlantic. Tough call for an 8-9 game. Florida Atlantic 30-game winner. Memphis has an All-American in Kendrick Davis. I figure if the Tigers can take care of Houston in the conference title game, that they can handle this one, but it will not be easy. Duke is one of my favorite teams in this tournament. Against Oral Roberts, one of my favorite mid-major teams. And truth is, if they were playing any other 5 seed, I would have picked it. It doesn't matter. SD State, pick it. Miami, pick it. But unfortunately for them, they wound up against the Blue Devils. So I would see Oral Roberts going home, Duke moving on. Tennessee against Louisiana. Dangerous call because Tennessee has not been the same without Zakai Ziegler. How soon does it get them? It will get them. I don't think it'll be that soon, but I would not be shocked. Kentucky against Providence, a little bit of I don't know, revenge. Maybe that's a strong word, but Hopkins, who is the star for Providence, was at Kentucky as a freshman. He went to Providence and had a great year as a sophomore transfer. He'll want to take care of what he left behind at Kentucky, but I think UK has too much if they're healthy. The closer we get to the game, the more we find out about Cason Wallace's health, the more confident I'll be in that pick. Kansas State against Montana State. K-State, not really thinking too hard about that one. Michigan State against USC. Not an easy call. Michigan State up and down, as many of the teams in the Big Ten were. USC down sometimes when they had tough games. It wasn't hard to get through the Pac-12 up because there were so many weak teams. They were up and down, SC was, when they had the tough games to play. I settled on Michigan State, but not with great confidence. And then Marquette easily passed Vermont. Purdue against Memphis. I don't think Purdue's ready to go out yet, but their guards have got to play better than they have. Their wings, they have to play better. Zach Edey does not have to play better. He just has to be Zach Edey, the All-American center who was the Sporting News Player of the Year. Duke against Tennessee. This is where Zakai Ziegler's absence gets Tennessee. Still hard to play against, but Duke will figure it out. They've played against hard to play against before when they played Virginia a few times, and they managed it comfortably in the conference title game. They managed it and had a free throw that didn't happen, if you remember that, and would have won on the road, but I digress. Moving on to Kentucky and K-State. That's a tough call, obviously, a 3 versus a 6. But if Kentucky is good enough to beat Providence, that means they're healthy enough to go ahead and beat K-State. Going to be tough to keep Marquise Noel out of the lane, but I think the interior power that Kentucky brings prevails. And then Michigan State versus Marquette. I really like what Marquette has done. I think they continue on. I think the beautiful pick and rolls run between Tyler Kolek and Oso Ighodaro, they are some of the most beautiful basketball you could ask to see, and I think they'll do enough of it to the Spartans to advance. Purdue versus Duke. I mentioned before, Duke's one of my favorite teams in this tournament. I don't know that they win the championship, but I think they're going to come close, and I have them taking out Purdue because of their decided advantage on the perimeter, although they are not a great shooting team, so they're going to have to be really effective with Kyle Filipowski finding different ways to score that Zach Edey can't impact. And then Kentucky versus Marquette. I think this is where Marquette's superior performance and Kentucky's up and down nature, mostly related to injury, but not entirely related to injury. I think this is where Kentucky bows out and Marquette moves on. Duke beating Marquette to go to the Final Four, and we'll see the Blue Devils there for a second consecutive year. Out in the Midwest region, Houston over Northern Kentucky for sure. Auburn against Iowa. I picked Auburn. Iowa is the best offensive team that doesn't have a great defense in college basketball. So it's going to be difficult for Auburn, but this is Bruce Pearl's time of year. He just keeps getting it done. So we're going to go with Auburn there. My first real true upset of the first round, and maybe my only one, Drake over Miami. Love Miami's team. Love Jim Larinaga in the tournament, but think this is a possibility that Drake's excellent execution, the only worry I haven't played since Sunday, March 5th. So they'll start the game against Miami with at least 10 days of rest. Is that good or is that bad? Do they lose that rhythm that they had going at the end? I'm still going to go with them. Indiana and Kent State, maybe the toughest draw Indiana could have gotten as a 4 seed. Kent State put 58 points on Toledo in the MAC championship game. 58 in the second half. 20 minutes of basketball, 58 points. That's how dynamic they can be offensively when they are on. And Indiana's going to have to deal with that. Indiana is going to have to bring it better than they did in the Big Ten tournament semifinals. They're going to have to bring it better than they did in the overtime victory over Michigan. They can't take these pauses in the middle of games that they take and allow teams to be competitive when probably should not be. And they better not do it against Kent State or they're going to have trouble. But I have Indiana moving on. Iowa State against Missouri State on my bracket, and I think Iowa State prevails. Mississippi State, not Missouri State. Mississippi State, great defense, not much offense. Iowa State handles that. Xavier against Kennesaw, really like the season that Kennesaw had. They did a tremendous job. What a beautiful job building the program up. but Xavier is ready to advance. Texas A&M against Penn State. Penn State, tough matchup, not a conventional team. But remember this, when you have 4 games in one day to get through in a single building, fouls are at a premium. They don't like to call fouls, and Texas A&M commits more fouls called and uncalled than any team in America. And not the ticky-tack on the arm kind of fouls. They hit you. So that's a tough day for Penn State. So I think A&M moves on. And then Texas, my favorite in the region, of course, beating an underseeded Colgate team that should have been at minimum a 14 and maybe a 13. Then Houston against Auburn. If Marcus Sasser is whole, if he's healthy, if he's at least close to himself, I think they get through Auburn and move on to the Sweet 16. If I'm right and that upset happens, Indiana should be in position to handle Drake. Iowa State, Xavier. Tough game. Both teams are terrific. Xavier's offense a little bit more than what Iowa State can handle, I think. And I have Xavier moving on. And then Texas at the bottom of that region, taking on Texas A&M in what will be an absolute battle. I mentioned A&M's propensity to foul, to play physically. I think that's something that the Longhorns can handle, and I have them moving on, where in the next round they will play Xavier and again prevail. It's going to be really tough, but I think Xavier's defense, that's the weakness of the Musketeers. I think the Longhorns are able to get through that. Houston, Indiana. If Houston's this far in the tournament, they're making at least to the Elite Eight and battling Texas. That's another. I mean, Texas is going to have to go. A lot of teams that are jealous of them because of all the attention the Longhorns get, their own TV network and all that. They're going to have to battle a lot of those teams in this tournament. But I think Texas has the goods to prevail over Houston. Part of the reason that I picked Houston, though, I will warn you, is that I wasn't trusting them to be healthy and whole with what I saw happen to Marcus Sasser, so I didn't feel comfortable picking them going to the Final Four. If they did play Texas, I might feel a little bit more in line with the Cougars. So something to think about as you pick your bracket. Down in the West region, we've got Kansas, of course, moving on against a really terrific Howard team that won a wonderful MEAC competition this year. Great championship game against Norfolk State. Arkansas, Illinois. I do not know what Illinois is going to be day to day. I don't know what they're going to be minute to minute. I spent the full year trying to figure it out. Never managed it. Arkansas, a little bit less vexing and beginning to find their talent level now that Nick Smith's been back for a few weeks. So I have them advancing through Illinois. St. Mary's, VCU. I picked St. Mary's. That's a game that if you want to pick a 12-5, certainly VCU is capable of that. I don't think St. Mary's is going deep in this tournament, so it would be a good one maybe to get. But I had St. Mary's on my bracket. And then UConn, Iona. I know it's a good show, and I know Rick Pitino's the greatest tactical coach this side of Larry Brown, but I think the Huskies are going away in this tournament. And I mean going away, it's not away. So I think that I'll take the Huskies. Bottom, we talking about TCU over Arizona State on my bracket. I think TCU has great ability and great depth, lots of different weapons, and 2 tremendous guards. Denny Crum used to say this is a guards game in March, so they're going to have to prove it. And then Gonzaga over Grand Canyon easily. Northwestern, Boise State. I'm not really sure. Northwestern has played very well lately, but got through so many tough games and has played so many overtime games. I'm not sure that they can create distance from Boise. That will be a big game for the Mountain West, because the Mountain West got 4 teams in this field, and I think they earned about 2 of them. But if they can beat Northwestern, maybe they can back up what the committee did. And then UCLA over UNC Asheville. Going through the next round, I have Kansas over Arkansas, based just on pure ability and sense of purpose. They know who they are. They're going to win that game. I mentioned before I'm not wild about St. Mary's going a long way in this, and then I do feel good about UConn, the variety of weapons, the size they have, the depth they have. UConn has had a great season, but they would have had a better season if they didn't have a rough go in the middle of the Big East schedule, partly due to injury, somewhat due to maybe losing focus a little bit, but they're back on track. TCU, I picked to beat Gonzaga. Gonzaga has been in 7 consecutive Sweet 16s. If they do this, they will be the 8th. They will be within 1 of tying the record that is exclusive to the expanded bracket era. Duke made 9 consecutive Sweet 16s, which required 2 victories. North Carolina in the late 80s, early 90s, early 80s and early 90s, they did 13 in a row, but some of those only required 1 win. So not quite the same. 8 of them required 2. So this is a chance for them to match that part of the streak. I just think at some point it's got to end, and I think it ends against the great backcourt play of TCU. Boise and UCLA. UCLA is not what they have been, but they are still the toughest mentally and the most together team in this entire tournament. So I have them moving on. Kansas against UConn. I think this is where Kansas's size becomes a problem against Adama Sanogo and Donovan Clingan. A terrific low post rotation, including a star player in Sanogo. So I think that's what happens. Kansas, UConn, and then TCU, UCLA. I think that UCLA has the right rhythm of game and the right control on the game to beat TCU, but not necessarily in the Elite 8 to take down UConn with all the weapons and the variety of size they have. So I have UConn moving into the Final Four. In the Final Four, Alabama-Duke. I just don't think Duke is ready to win a national championship under John Shire. I do think Alabama, with the best talent in this field, is. And at Texas-UConn, I have UConn moving on in that one. And what a championship game it would be. Really, it's going to be hard to have a bad championship game in this field, to be honest, because it's so balanced. Nobody great, a lot of very good, some good. So it's going to be an interesting Final Four. I have Alabama beating UConn to claim the 2023 national championship. It may not be a popular pick, and it probably won't be a popular champion based on what we learned a couple of weeks back about the Alabama program and how they handled an awful situation near their campus. But it will be a deserving champion just in basketball terms. This is a terrific, talented team that has played extraordinarily well through most of this season. I'm Mike DeCourcy. That's my bracket picks for 2023. Good luck. And remember, this bracket is not, this was not handed down from Mount Sinai. Make your picks wisely. You can just use mine as a guide, but it's going to be a tough call all the way through.